Right, so thank you.
So we are live on YouTube and I have started recording also.
सर वो लाइव स्ट्रीम का लिंक दे देना सर प्लीज.
So it is live now.
सर लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग का लिंक प्लीज.
Yes.
Volunteers, please share the link on Annual group also. All groups, please share that.
Start now. Good
Yes,
morning
you can.
and welcome to the one-day International Faculty Development Program on the theme Social Construction of Gender, organized jointly by the Bombay Teachers Training College and the Nari Gursahani Law College. We commence today's proceedings with the national anthem. I request you all to please stand. Balani sir.
Dr. Balani, you need to play the national anthem, please. Dr. Balani, you need to play the national anthem, please.
Ma'am, can we sing the national anthem instead?
Please let us sing the national anthem.
Meenakshi ma'am, can we sing the national anthem instead?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Please all join in. All join in.
Janagana mana dinayak jaya
Jaya hi
Bharat bhagya vidhata Punjab Sindh Gujarat Maratha
Dravida Utkala Banga Vindhya Himachal Yamuna
Chala Jaladhi Taranga Tava Nami Jage Tava Shubhashi Mange
Gahe Tava Jaya Gata Janagana Mangala
Dayak Jaya He Bharat Bhagya Vidhata Jaya He Jaya He
Jaya Jaya
Thank you all.
Thank you. I call upon Dr. Nilima Chandiramani, Principal of Nari Gursahani Law College, to deliver the welcome note.
A very good morning and a hearty welcome to one and all. The Indian National Council for Educational Research and Training has recommended steps to advance gender equity through stories, songs, activities, and facilitation aids. And it has said that both men and women, to this I would add the transgender, all of them should appear as leaders, heroes, and problem solvers. So now the question is, how will these ideas make their way into our classrooms, either real or virtual? Obviously, it is through us, the teachers, who are the facilitators and sharers of knowledge. So it is essential that we first of all clear our blurred vision as to the societal construction of gender. Otherwise, we will fail in our mission to portray men, women, and transgender as leaders, heroes, and problem solvers to our students. Now, today we are having eminent speakers from different jurisdictions, cultures, and countries. And I'm sure some of them may look at the topic from the male or the transgender perspective, and we will have a beautiful kaleidoscopic view of the topic. But when we come to India, the term gender immediately relates to gender justice or gender equity, and a woman comes into our vision. Again, this is natural because it is a woman who is depicted as washing clothes with Ariel or Surfmatic, or cleaning bathrooms with Harpic, or mopping the floor with Lysol, or taking care of the elderlies or the children, and so many other things. And mind you, all this work goes unpaid. Again, why is it that the onerous duties of custody are dumped on a mother, but the all embracing guardianship rights are given to the father? I'm sure today's faculty program will address these and such other issues. Now, today we have with us a galaxy of intellectual stars, all shining and twinkling in the dark sky of COVID-19. So I begin by first of all welcoming our four dignitaries of the board. Honorable, Honorable Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani, the Provost of the HSNC University and the past President and Trustee of the HSNC Board. Sir, it is you who has guided us and motivated us to doing all these activities. Today, when I pause and I reflect, I realize that the activities we have done in these 4 months, perhaps we couldn't have done it in an entire year. And we have really got addicted to you, sir. I'm also delighted to have our president and trustee, Mr. Kishu Mansukhani, sir, who is always supporting all our causes and activities. We are missing today Mr. Anil Harish, our trustee and past president, and one of the most eminent lawyers in the country. He has an urgent meeting with his client in, I think, Hong Kong, but he has conveyed his good wishes. And let us not forget Mrs. Maya Shahani, the one and the only lady trustee of our board, elegant, learned, and unique. I seek all your blessings and your good wishes for this one-day faculty program. We also have with us a battery of eminent speakers. Being in different time zones, they are not able to join us right away. For example, in Canada, it is just 1 a.m. Join us at the time allotted to them. But I think But I think we have with us Professor Asha Bajpai, a friend and a colleague of mine from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. And I think even we have with us Professor Fulvia Abodante from University of Naples, Italy. Very soon, we will be joined by Professor Peter Cunningham from Nelson Mandela University, South Africa. Post lunch, we are going to have two more speakers, educators from the Toronto District School Board, Mike and Kathy. And the last speaker will be Dr. Amir Bomik from Lincoln University School, Malaysia. I extend a very warm welcome to all our eminent speakers. I welcome them to India, to Mumbai, to HSNC Board, and to Nari Gosani Law College. It is also gratifying to have with us some of the principals of the board, and more importantly, our participants who have come from various parts of the country, and some are going to join us from outside the country in the afternoon. I'm sure you are going to have an intellectual treat and an abundant takeaway from this one-day international faculty development program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. We truly look forward to listening to the galaxy of speakers from across the globe today. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce you to the dignitaries for this morning's program. We have with us Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani, Provost of the HSNC University. Dr. Hiranandani is the co-founder and MD at the Hiranandani Group and is globally renowned as a developer and has redefined the skyline of Mumbai. He has been conferred a doctoral degree in management for his thesis on real estate. Currently, he holds many prestigious positions in apex bodies and has played a leadership role in various industry bodies, contributing to policy framing, township development, and other uh, undertakings. With his passion, persistence, and commitment, he has made a difference to the lives of many. We also have with us Mr. Kishu Mansukhani, President of the HSNC Board. He has worked with the Tata Group of companies in various capacities and has been the recipient of several awards for his distinguished services, including a citation by the German Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Mansukhani is deeply involved in social and humanitarian activities and heads charitable trusts which have assisted in rehabilitating many individuals. Mr. Mansukhani's family has been associated with the board from its inception in Sindh. Srimati Chandibai Himatmal Mansukhani College, the Mansukhani Institute of Management. His family has contributed vastly to the establishment of libraries, auditoriums, schools of the HSNC board, including land for the CHM campus. Mr. Mansukhani is closely associated with the Sadhu Vaswani mission. In the words of Dada Vaswani, God needs instruments of help and healing, and I love to think of you as one such instrument. We have with us Mrs. Maya Shahani, ever gracious, governing board member and trustee of the HSNC board, chairperson of the Sage Foundation. Ma'am is also the chairperson of the Thadumal Shahani Center for Management. Ma'am is the trustee of the Thadumal Shahani Trust and vice chairperson of the Global Dialogue Foundation, founder trustee of the Women's Movement for Peace and Prosperity, and an education board member of the Sadhu Vaswani Mission and the Priyadarshini Academy. Mrs. Shani is also patron of the Cancer Patients Aid Association as well as chairperson Justice H.K. Chainani Elders Home. From this vast variety of undertakings, you can see how Mrs. Shahani fulfills her duties with such compassion and commitment. I now call upon Dr. Neelu Verma, Assistant Professor at BTTC, to take the proceedings forward.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. This is an extremely momentous occasion for all of us at BTTC. For we release our college magazine, Metamorphosis, for the year 2019.
Light field on our YouTube channel.
This is the 12th edition, Metamorphosis. I clearly remember BTTC in 2008. We brought out the first edition. Since then, being the chief faculty editor, I've had many experiences compiling it each year. But yes, we always find a way when there's adversity. This year has been very different, and more than anything else, I miss the feel of the book, the texture, the smell of the newly printed sheets, and the rustle of the wrapping paper while we officially open it and present it to the stakeholders. This year, when we cannot come together physically, we meet on virtual platform and we will read the e-version of this book. Although the students and the faculty editors do maximum work for putting the book together, they are always supported by all the students in some way or the other. And that is what makes this edition supremely different. I request Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani sir to officially release the Metamorphosis 2020 and address the stakeholders.
My heartiest congratulations to Principal Balani, all of you, Dr. Neelu Verma, the entire faculty and the staff for creating a e-magazine, which is worthy of seeing. As I can see, it's very beautiful, and I'm sure it's also well written. So heartiest congratulations and happy to launch the magazine. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This is the version which has 150 pages and has almost every activity that is organized at BTT during the academic year. So the last academic year, as you all know, celebrated our 50th Golden Jubilee anniversary. So there were many, many more activities added, and hence this volume is a little fluffier one, 150 pages. So you can please continue and address the gathering. Sir, kindly unmute yourself.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, please do send us a copy of it.
Yes, sir, surely.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you can continue with your address.
Yeah, my heartiest best wishes, Principal Nilima Chandiramani, Principal Balani, both of you, heartiest congratulations on creating this webinar, international webinar on a very, very sensitive and important subject. And I say sensitive because people in India are not willing to talk about it as much. So I think in that respect, it is sensitive. It is important because these kind of subjects, if discussed and put into order, become extremely important. We've just talked about what is the women's problems in this role and what has happened. The government of India, the states, the social envelope that we are now living with have definitely created several laws for the purposes of protection of women. I can cite a few. The protection of women for domestic violence, which was done in 2005 and released in October of 2006. Extremely important. Dowry Prohibition Act, which has been there, but is followed many times by a violation, which is not really worked against. We have the question of Commission of Sati, which is now perfect. And nothing more in terms of sati have I heard except for one case maybe 15, 20 years ago. The sexual harassment of women in workplace. I think this has been an important role and a lot of work has gone very positively and proactively into this whole aspect. But what is the actual thing that we really need to do? I think the actual part of it, which we must discuss and do, is to educate, educate, educate. Educate the young, educate the children, male and female, educate the teenagers, educate the college students, educate the people and public general, and be able to educate them that the respect for women must be there in our society, and that is the most important thing of all. The second thing which I do believe as far as women is concerned is to see that they have economic independence. So they should have education, they should get employment, and as far as possible should play an economic role. And I think that becomes extremely important for a woman in our society. Marriage, early marriages, of course, needs to be totally looked down upon, though it is still continuing in some parts of our country. So I think the legal side, the polity has done its job. Now it's up to the social mentors and people like you to think up ideas as to how to take it forward and to see that this is implemented in practice. But it's more about carrying the people and educating them and seeing to it that becomes extremely important. And that is why the roles played by such meetings, which is very, very important, the roles played by people like Mr. Kishu Mansukani, our president, Maya Shani, becomes also an important role because they will be able to take this foundation to many, many more people and educate them and see to it that such social justice is maintained. So this is one part of the whole part of social construction of gender. The second part of social construction of gender has been a revolution in India, and that is the lesbian, the gay, the bisexual, and the transgender, the LGBT. And in our country, the Supreme Court has given a tremendous judgment in favor of these people not being criminalized. As far as the British were concerned, they had brought in a law under 377 of the Indian Penal Code, wherein this provision was that such people who had unnatural sex or unnatural relationships would be put to jail. Now, what Supreme Court has decided that this is not wrong anymore, and there is complete liberty to have this kind of thing. So our meetings today becomes an extremely important factor in order to communicate these kind of judgments as well as the changes which have taken place in our society. However, if you look back in history, the Hindu culture did not look down upon all these things. It was the British which actually decriminalized it under the Indian Penal Code. If you look at the temples of Khajuraho, which are famous for erotic sculptures, they contain all these kind of relationships which are clear and open. However, it needed the Supreme Court in order to give this decision in favor of this sector and gender of society. So whether it is women, whether it is the LGBT, the legal part of it becomes extremely important because the foundation of it is legal. But we have to go far beyond that. Society doesn't live only by laws. They live by social mores and practices and relationships and respect. Respect for women, respect for differences in society and people like that. So I'm sure this will be well debated today, and all these aspects and others will be considered by all of you so that society in India has a paradigm change with respect for women and differences in gender and sex. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you again and again for various programs that you have initiated. It's a wonderful thing, and the kind of subjects that you have taken have actually excited my mind in order to learn more, not only from what is in the program, but to go beyond it. So thank you very much once again, and keep on doing what you're doing. It's a wonderful thing that all of you. So once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for guiding us all through this webinar. I request Mr. Kishu Mansukhani, sir, to address the gathering.
Nilu ma'am, sir was trying to join us, but sir couldn't join us. Sir has sent a message. I will send it to you. Please read it out after Maya ma'am's speech.
All right, so I can invite Mrs. Maya Shahni, ma'am. Please address the gathering.
Thank you. Malala had said while addressing the UN, I raise my voice not so I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. We cannot succeed when half of us are held back. And I represent the half that is so-called held back. Although in my life as a woman, I've never felt that I was held back. I feel privileged to be a woman. And I think it's how a woman conducts herself and how she goes about doing her work that makes her stand apart, even from men. Nelson Mandela had also quoted, freedom cannot be achieved until women have been emancipated by all forms of oppression. Two different genders, but both of the same opinion. Apart from being a trustee of the HSNC board, a woman trustee, and the chairperson of the Shahani Group and Sage Foundation, as earlier said, I'm also the founder trustee of Women's Movement for Peace and Prosperity, which was initiated by Indu Jain, the chairperson of the Times Group, because when she addressed the UN Peace Summit, she had said, give a voice to women. If you give women a chance, non-violence will be the religion of the next millennium. She felt that peace and prosperity are interlinked, and because women work out of compassion, there's a chance for peace. I'm also the vice chairperson of Global Dialogue Foundation, which works on bringing all cultures and communities together through love, understanding, and dialogue. And the big thing that we focus on is gender equality. Diversity in the workplace brings in a lot of pluses because it's women who bring in their own positives, their own way of functioning, which it's been shown that if there are women in the workforce, the economy and health of the country also improves. Our two colleges, the Bombay Teachers Training College and the Nari Gursahani Law College, are shining examples of how, if they focus on gender equality, the law colleges bring out laws, as our provost and former president, Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani said. There's so many proactive laws to bring women to the forefront, and they've been really very positively biased towards women. The Bombay Teachers Training College has a majority of women as teachers, and it's the women through their compassion and nurturing qualities and the way women look after children, it is really commendable. So they can impact so many lives. So I'm so happy that these two colleges who represent our board are today having this international talk on gender equality. So what do we mean by gender? Gender is not sex. Sex is what you are physically born with, the physical attributes that you have, and we have transgenders also. But, your sex does not identify, it does not give society a leeway to divide women and men as two separate groups, because we are all equally capable. We all have our pluses and minuses. So if men and women work shoulder to shoulder, that will help our society more than working in silos. And there is a difference between gender equity and gender equality. There's also a difference, there's a gender gap. And that also, a gender gap is a measure of, it is, for example, one can measure the gender gap between boys and girls in terms of health outcomes as well as educational levels achieved and labor income. Our provost had said that it is the way a woman can come up in life is mainly through education and economic independence. So it is equally crucial for girls and boys both to get the same quality of education and have the same responsibilities and privileges in the workspace. There is gender bias also, because an example of a second generation gender bias is, first generation, like Dr. Niranjan said, women were really respected in the ancient times, and there were women goddesses along with men deities. But in the second generation gender bias, that is the current generation, it is felt that leaders are expected to be assertive, so that when women who act in a more they act in a more collaborative fashion, are viewed as are not viewed as leaders, but women who act assertively are often perceived as too aggressive. So where do women stand in this kind of gender bias? See, these are stereotypes that we need to get rid of. And of course, there's gender-based violence also, which shows in the way of female infanticide, early and forced marriage, and honor killings. We have female genital mutilations. We have child sexual abuse and exploitation. We have human trafficking, sexual coercion, harassment and abuse, neglect, domestic and intimate partner violence, and economic deprivation. So these are the things that women have to live with, and including the girl child. And although through life, society creates distinctions between men and women. We create stereotypes. We always say boys wear blue, girls wear pink, men are superior, women are inferior, men are providers, women are the homemakers, men do not cry, women are weak. Sometimes it tilts towards the men also. These days, men have started feeling victimized, which is also not very nice to do in society, because we are all equal. I always feel that no one is higher or lower than the other. So we have separate toilets for men and women. We have separate clothes for men and women. And then at the end of our lives, we get some wisdom and our graves are identical. So why can't we be wise right now? And so we must remember that it is only biologically that we are different. There are emotional and psychological differences too, but capability-wise, we are the same. So gender parity is not just good for women, it is good for societies. We began to raise daughters more like sons, but few have the courage to raise their sons more like daughters. This is what Gloria Steinem had said. Any society that fails to harness the energy and creativity of women in the modern world is at a great disadvantage. If you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman. But here we have Dr. Balani and Dr. Nilima, a shining example of a man and woman working together. They always do what they say, and they always say what they do. So thank you, Dr. Nilima and Dr. Bhagwan Balani, for inviting me at today's very topical and interesting webinar. As a woman trustee, you gave me a right to say what I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. You've rightly mentioned that we have many issues and challenges with respect to women empowerment. And simultaneously, we also have many role models who we can emulate and try our level best to bridge this gap. Today, we are not so fortunate to not have Mr. Kishu Mansukhani sir with us. However, he's been very kind and generous to send his address, which I will be reading now verbatim. This is from Kishu sir. Good morning, Dr. Asha Bajpai, Professor TIS, Dr. Peter Cunningham, Professor Nelson Mandela University, South Africa, Professor Fulvia Abondante, University of Naples, my colleagues, Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani, Mr. Anil Harish, Mrs. Maya Shahni, trustees of HSNC board, Principal Dr. Nilima Chandiramani, Nari Gursahani Law College, Principal Dr. Bhagwan Balani, Bombay Teachers Training College, teachers, and all my dear participants. My compliments to Dr. Nilima Chandiramani, Dr. Bhagwan Balani, and their teams for organizing this one-day international faculty development program on social construction of gender. The main feature of this international faculty development program is to help faculty in understanding processes of the social construction of gender and its impact on society at large concerning educational, social, economic, and its global impact. The outcome of this program will help faculty to reflect on their perspectives and pedagogies used by them to educate younger generations. This will also motivate the faculty to contemplate on their understanding of the subject and take a more liberal and broader approach while discussing gender issues with younger generations. With Indian context, we are an emerging society. Still, we need to get away with dogmatic methods of gender empowerment. Surely deliberations of experts will help faculty to review the practices and approaches before teaching gender-related issues in their respective disciplines. In the Indian context, social construction of gender evolve in the following manner. 1. Preference to male child. Girl child, more often than not, is considered liability in many social circles. 2. Thus, early marriages of girls have put female gender vulnerable in rural India. 3. Dowry system, although illegal, still prevails in rural areas and some of the urban areas. 4. Proactive and take bold holistic measures by bringing reforms in all sectors and create opportunities for the girls to get the education and attain financial independence. 5. We have to teach new lessons to the parents, not to distinguish between the male and female child in the process of their upbringing. And 6, all the efforts should be made to eradicate illiteracy. Once again, I congratulate the principals and faculty of both colleges for organizing this collaborative endeavor. I wish the program a grand success. Thank you. God bless. Jai Hind, Jai Maharashtra, Jai Jhulelal. This was read out from the document that Mr. Kishu Mansukhani had sent to us. Thank you, sir, for being so kind and sending your words to us for this morning. I request Dr. Bhagwan Balani, sir, to continue with the proceedings and give the formal vote of thanks.
Neelu, I would just like to come in for a moment.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Anil Harish, our trustee and past president, too cannot join us, though he has not sent us a written message, but he has sent his good wishes. So I would like to convey his good wishes to all of you. Okay.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, Anil Harish, sir, for being so generous. Bhagwan Balani, sir, you can continue, please.
Good morning to one and all. Respected Honorable Provost, Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani, Provost, HSNC University, Mr. Kishu Mansukhani, President, HSNC Board, Madam Maya Shani, Trustee, HSNC Board, Madam Nilima Chandiramani, Principal Nari Gursahani Law College. I am thankful for being a mentor to me. I am the youngest among all, and I am learning from you all. You are my role models, and I am fortunate that I have got legacy of Hyderabad National Collegiate Board, and the kind of philosophy that our board is following is truly is inspiring, because the way we have been working for the cause of the welfare of the society, and the way we have been educating the students who are affiliated with us, if I say in numbers more than 45,000, it's truly an amazing, we can say, experience for all of us. So as far as this international faculty development program is concerned, it was my wish to collaborate with Nari Gusani Law College, and I requested Dr. Nilima Chandiramani to collaborate with us, and we were thinking and contemplating to come together to have a collaborative seminar. The reason behind is that education is interdisciplinary by nature, and we have got a paper, Gender, School and Society, and I have taught this paper for a couple of years. While teaching this paper in the classroom, I realized that a lot of disparity exists in the society. The kind of education that shall prevail and shall reach out to the girls, it is not reaching out to them. And the kind of treatment that is given to the vulnerable section of society, this, the girls and the other, we can say, other than the male members, it is not up to the mark. And then, and I used to teach this to the girls. I have got two daughters, and then while teaching, while discussing these issues with them, some of the girls they shared some of their very personal experiences, the kind of sexual abuse they experienced during their school life. Now, all those stories which were shared with me in the classroom by the girls showed a lot of trust, their trust in me, being a male member. So I started thinking that these girls are trusting so much to me, to a male member, like a father to them. So although their stories touched me a lot, I started reflecting. And from the beginning, there was a lot of love and care for every child who got admission at Bombay Teachers Training College. And in true sense, I consider them as my own daughters, and I am truly committed that the way I take care of my daughters, I have been taking care, and I will take care of all those girls as my own daughters. So all those experiences led me to think to organize such a program along with the experts, because in that paper, lot of sections are there from the law, which should be taught and to the girls so that we can empower them. And in my classes, I used to tell them that now law is there with you. First, you have to empower yourself. And whenever you will move in the classroom as a regular teacher, make sure that even the boys' children are also taught the various, we can say, etiquettes towards girls. They also must respect the girls. So until and still corrections are not done in the schools, we cannot enforce the law in each and every aspect of our life. So no doubt, law helps us to control as far as violence against women, but education, I think, can be can play a much greater role as far as education of girl child as well as the education of the boy child is concerned. And BTDC is truly committed for this. So I am thankful to the resource person, Madam Asha Bajpai, from professor from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Madam Fulvia from Canada. They will be there with us to deliberate more on as far as social construction of the gender is concerned. But apart from that, I am thankful to the entire team of Nari Gursani Law College and Bombay Teachers Training College. Most of my colleagues are women, and we enjoy a very good relationship like brother and sister. And they have been a great support to me in all times. And we call it as a BTDC family. And I'm truly proud to have very contemporary colleagues like them, as a pillar of support. And because of them, we could do this. And very special thanks to the student volunteers, that technical team who has been a great support to BTDC, as well as all the participants. So I am truly indebted with the overwhelming support which I have received from the BIP team, our technical supports, our student volunteers, and our dear participants. Because of you, we are able to organize this program. And I'm looking forward to have many more reflective and more ideas, so that we can rethink, revise our old educational practices, our educational pedagogies, so that we can empower each and every section of the society. We can teach them the equality, the respect for one another, and mutual growth. We must strive to help them to understand the power of the working together and collaborating their efforts and learning from one another. With this spirit, I open this session. Open this session for all to deliberate more on this subject. Over to Dr. Nilu Verma.
Thank you, sir.
Nilu ma'am,
So we've been joined by
yes.
Mr. Kishu Mansukhani,
Yes.
sir. And before we proceed with
Good
the
morning,
program,
sir.
sir, very good morning. Thank you for being here this morning. I request you, though I have already read your address to the entire gathering, but sir, please unmute yourself.
But still, we look forward for your
We
blessings, sir.
still look forward to hearing from you.
Yes.
Sir, please unmute yourself, Kishu sir.
Thank you for reading out the speech. My internet somehow had a difficulty, so I couldn't connect. Thank you. I heard your speech fully.
Thank you. I hope I read it well.
I can only wish you all the best. I think the very apt subject you people have come up with. I think a lot to be done, particularly so in Indian context. I heard a few words from Maya also. Maya was explaining difficulties we are having of gender equality here. But I think in today's world and in today's generation, I think there should be no gender equality. There should be all equal. There should be no difference between the male and female. So I wish you come out with some suggestions, and I look forward to when you are ready for it. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, sir. I now hand over the session to Dr. Sambita to take over the proceedings. Dr. Sambita Dabral.
Thank you, Dr. Nilu.
Thank you.
Good morning to one and all present with us today. I, Assistant Professor Sambita Dabral from Nari Gulsani Law College, shall be the coordinator for Technical Session 1. For this session, we have with us a revered academician, Dr. Asha Bajpai, as the resource person to speak on the topic, Social Construction of Gender. Nari Gulsani Law College and Bombay Teachers Training College welcomes you, ma'am, wholeheartedly to this International Faculty Development Program. Before I invite Dr. Asha Bajpai to share her views and knowledge with all of us, I wish to quickly introduce her to all of you. Dr. Asha Bajpai did her graduation in science with statistics and economics and her master's in law and business management. She did short-term stints as a management trainee, junior lawyer, sub-editor, visiting lecturer before she entered full-time academics commencing from National Law School of India, University, Bangalore, where she also obtained her MPhil and PhD in law. She has specialized in child rights laws, access to justice for vulnerable and disadvantaged groups like women, disabled, and elderly and social legislations. She is currently a professor of law at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, and she is involved in teaching, research, training, gender justice issues, legal aid clinic education, and legislative reforms relating to vulnerable for more than 3 decades. As founder dean of School of Law at TIS, she designed the unique curriculum, LLM curriculum course on access to justice for preparing community lawyers. She is engaged in capacity building of judicial law enforcement, government officials, civil society members. She was the project director of field action projects such as university-based and community-based legal services clinic for the marginalized and vulnerable groups and Project Chunauti for rehabilitation and social reintegration of orphan children in institutions. Her recent publications include Child Rights by OUP and Exploitation to Empowerment by Palgrave Macmillan, chapters in Violence in Criminal Justice System, and Childhoods in India. These are some of the publications to her credit. She is also invited as an expert by various authorities such as the High Courts. She is the amicus curiae and commissioner in public interest litigations of Mumbai and Delhi High Court. She has also been invited as an expert at the UNESCO high-level meeting on ECCE and by UNODC on Education for Justice. Dr. Bajpai is a visiting lecturer at American University, Warwick and Westminster Universities, and is the lead speaker at various national and international universities and conferences. Dr. Bajpai is a member of various national and international committees, including Global Alliance for Justice Education, Child Rights Watch, National Human Rights Commission, Maharashtra State Legal Service Authority, Mumbai High Court Legal Services Committee, University of Police, Security and Criminal Justice, Ministry of Women and Child Committee on CRC India Country Report, etc. Ma'am, it is an honor and privilege for us to have you amongst us today to deliberate on this very sensitive and important topic, social construction of gender. On behalf of Nari Gulsani Law College and Bombay Teachers Training College, I welcome you, ma'am, to this International Faculty Development Program. And now I request Dr. Asha Bajpai, ma'am, to start the session. Thank you so much. Over to you, Asha, ma'am. Ma'am, please unmute yourself. Ma'am, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, ma'am. Sorry to disturb you. Just a second. It's a humble request to all the participants. Please do not put anything in the chat box. Only if, while the proceeding is going on, if you have any question, please put it in a very clear manner in the chat box. And instead, apart from questions, please do not put anything. At the end of the session, we will be taking up a question answer round where all your queries will be answered by Dr. Asha Bajpai. Thank you so much, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you for this very kind introduction. I feel humbled by it. And good morning to the dignitaries of the HSNC board and trustees and all the dignitaries present here. And I would like to congratulate the team of Nari Gulsani Law College and Bombay Teachers Training College for organizing this very important webinar on a very comparative theme. And this is a very important issue. And I would like to personally, at the outset, thank Professor Nilima Chandiramani, a very good friend. For decades, I should say now, we have known each other. And I know her as a very dedicated and a passionate teacher. And I've got a lot of inspiration from her. So thank you for inviting me. And as has been mentioned by the earlier speakers, many of them, yes, sex and gender. This is what we will talk about today, the social construction of them. In day-to-day conversation, we tend to use sex and gender synonymously, replacing one with each other. But in sociology and by scholars in sociology, they say it is not the same. Now, I'll just share my screen now and I'll show you a presentation. So just let me know if you can see it properly. Is it okay? Hello?
No, ma'am, the screen is not yet shared, ma'am.
Not yet
shared? You have to
shared?
share the screen. No, ma'am.
Okay.
Dr. Neelu, if you could please help us on this. You have to make her the host to make her to share the screen.
The settings were such that everybody could share.
No, ma'am, she is not the host or co-host, so she won't be able to share it. We'll have to make her the co-host.
Okay, you will have to let me share it. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Palani,
Can I share it now?
ma'am, please try.
No, ma'am.
Please share. The settings are as such that everyone can share. Ma'am, you can
Yeah.
share.
Okay.
Please try.
And there's a green button at the bottom. Green button is there at the bottom.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You click on it.
Ma'am, but before you share the screen, you have to keep your PPT open.
Yes, my PPT is open, and I will just share the screen now. Is it now being shared?
No, not yet.
No, ma'am.
Bombay High Court for 35 years. Ma'am was designated as senior counsel in 2016 and has been appointed as amicus in a number of cases, particularly.
Ma'am, there's this green button next to chat and record.
Yeah, I'm clicking on it.
Yeah.
I'm clicking on it, but somehow it's not being shared.
One window will pop up, and then you have to click on the screen and then share.
Ma'am, when you share, can you see your PPT on the screen?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah,
She is not
I'm
a
being able to
co-host.
see my PPT on the
So,
screen.
ma'am, click on that PPT.
Balani, sir, she is not a co-host.
And then
Ranjit, sir, everyone can share screen. Even I can share screen. I tried it now.
Yeah.
So after clicking on the green button, you have to make your choice from the available windows.
And then say share.
Yes.
Ma'am, there's this small blue button share there on the screen that pops up.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a blue button right in the top bottom corner. I mean, sorry, bottom corner, right bottom corner.
Yes, ma'am. Now it has started.
Has started?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, you can put it on slideshow.
Yes.
Okay, I'll put it on slideshow. Is it coming now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, so we were talking about sex and gender, whether they are same or different. And as I mentioned, it was in sociology, and sociology scholars have said they are different. And as was mentioned earlier, sex refers to biological basis for differentiating between male, female, and also the third gender. And sex, which is universal, and it is determined at birth, and it cannot be changed automatically unless you go in for a screening, for a surgical process or something like that. Now, sex refers to biological basis. An example I can give is women give birth to babies, men don't. This could be a statement referring to sex, and gender refers to, as was mentioned, characteristics that we get by learning from society, through family, through socialization, and socialization you get through family, through education institutions, through friends, through society, through community, through the state, through law, as the state mentions. So this is the gender that we get through, and we have it is socially constructed through socialization. And it changes continuously as per time, society, place, region, thoughts, all of them. And it changes from time to time, from place to place, from region to region, from country to country, from state to state, and from culture to culture. So you have this continuous change as far as gender is concerned. An example of gender that was given was, in the morning, was that you know, we heard, even we heard today, even today I've heard that ladke rote nahi, ladke rote nahi. And this was said, this has been said several times to people. And also we heard that various other examples. And remember when today things are changing, but still there are communities, there are societies, there are families, there are people who say, when at birth of a child, oh girl, so barfi, a boy, peda. So these are certain things that go on as far as gender is concerned, which is all through socialization. It's a social construct of gender. And the first socialization site is the family. The family is the first socialization site as far as gender is concerned. I would like to show a small video clip for family being the first site for socializing. How it all begins. It all begins at the first site that is there. Okay, so this was the first site of socialization. I agree families have changed, but still in many homes, there are differences that are there between girls, treating the way the girls are brought up and the ways the boys are brought up, what the girls can do, what they can't do, what is allowed, what is not allowed. So this is what happens. And because of this, you have this in our country, as was mentioned even in the first inaugural session, there's a preference for sons. And that is why you have a declining sex ratio even today. For every 100 boys born nationally, there are 93 girls. And this is the Global Gender Gap Report of 2018 that is said. And where are these missing girls? These are the missing girls because there's a son preference here. And that is why you have several other ways in which people want to get rid of their daughters. Now, so these are some of the aspects that you get at the family site. I would like to go to the next site, and that is the textbooks, the education, the school textbooks, the college textbooks that are there. Remember when we were in school, I had a textbook, I still remember it, which showed a picture where the father was sitting reading a newspaper, the mother was in the kitchen cooking, and later the father was seen going to the office with his bag. So this was depicted there, and this picture is still in my mind. And there are many of us who has this picture. This is the division of labor, the sexual division of labor that is there, that is shown in our textbooks that are there. So there are many other such textbooks and many other such examples in which you show this kind of gender differentiation that is there. And this leads to a different set of rules for boys and girls, and later for men and women that are there. This kind of socialization leads to stereotyping, and biases at various sides, like different ideas of their roles they have. They have different, and this you remember, these are the same people. Now, when we are coming through this kind of families, this kind of education, when we are at workplace, what happens is that with this kind of socialization, when we go to workplace, the boy was there in the first video clip, when he becomes a boss, say in a workplace, the attitude that he will have, the socialization that he has gone through, is that he is superior, he is different. And women employees in his organization are different. So sexual harassment at workplace, in many cases, is the result of this kind of upbringing, this kind of socialization, this kind of social construction of gender. And India has one of the lowest labor gender participation in the world, under 18% in 2017, as compared to other 82% in other markets. This is in the Indian labor market update that I'm quoting, that is there. Now, in the corporate sector, if you see, women at the higher positions, at the CMD level or at the director level, they're struggling at 3%. There's a glass ceiling, the famous glass ceiling that is there, that are there at workplace. So public spaces, public sector corporates, or the corporate sector, or the workplaces are all gendered spaces also. There also, the gender socialization comes into play, the construction of gender comes to place, and so you have exclusion, you have discrimination, you have harassment, and you have marginalization of women. So this is one of the reasons why you have sexual harassment. We have Equal Remuneration Act, as all of you know, which says equal pay for equal work. But in spite of that, if you see, I've noticed at the railway stations in the morning, now it doesn't happen, but before the lockdown, at the railway stations in the mornings when I used to pass by that place, there used to be all those laborers and workers standing there waiting for jobs. Now, the rate at which they were going is, 100 rupees for a jodi. And 100 jodi means a male and a female together, and it was 60 for a male and 40 for a female. So this jodi rate also depicted how the sexual division of labor is there, how the social construction of work is there. So studies have shown that women earn 65% of what their male colleagues done. Several studies have shown that. Studies also suggest that an insignificant percentage of women managers reach the top portions. There is a glass ceiling, and gender stereotypes are present, the kind of work they do, the designations that they are given. So this is how, and we have very few women at the board level that is there. So we come to the next aspect of this kind of socialization, this kind of social construction of labor, the workplace. The workplace, and that, as I mentioned to you, the sexual harassment of work, the sexual harassment of women that is there. It is a reality faced by women across the world. It occurs, as we all know, in the context of power imbalance. Someone who has got power misuses the power because of the socialization that he has been brought up or she has been brought up. It even happens the reverse way. If there are women who are in position of power and authority, then also we get certain examples of harassment in those contexts as well. But those portion is very small. The percentage is very small. And the percentage of women who are being harassed with men in positions of power and authority is very much higher. Now we have come to another site in which you see the social construction of gender, and that is the law. In the legal division, you know, there has never been a Chief Justice, a women Chief Justice of India. And we have certain judgments which are very gender biased. The language is gender biased. I'll just quote one for want of time. In 2015, in Prakash versus Phulbati, the Supreme Court refused to give retrospective effect to a social welfare legislation, that is the 2005 amendment of the Hindu Succession Act, in which daughters were also for the first time recognized as co-partners in the Hindu joint family property. So this deprived the retrospective effect of the Hindu Succession Act. There is still now a law in the succession laws where Hindus can deprive his or her daughter from self-acquired property through testamentary powers of the will. In the succession rights, there is, if a Hindu dies, woman dies without a will, the Hindu inheritance laws puts the rights of her husband's heirs, the parents of the husband, above those of the parents. So you have discriminatory based personal laws even today. And we need to bring about gender justice. We need to have a uniform civil code with the perspective of gender justice. Get the best from every law, the best from every religious law, but make a gender just uniform civil code. Now, another site that I would like to do is, which millions of us follow, is the media. You see advertisements, as was mentioned by Professor Chandiramani. Yes, women advertise for kitchen appliances, for soaps, and for detergents. And you have males who are same soap. If a woman advertises, she is the focus is on fragrance, on complexion. But if the same soap a man advertises, it's on par, it's on germ killing property of the soap. So the perspective is different even while advertising, and millions of people, millions of children, and millions of youth are watching it and are being affected by it. I would like to point out this advertisement of Kinder Joy that is there, that's going on at the moment. The pink and the blue, can you see it very prominently? The pink and the blue is very prominently seen here, and also the toys and the gifts that they get from this Kinder Joy. The girl gets a Barbie doll or something like that way, and the boy gets a superhero, Superman, those kinds of things, a plane. So this is what this advertising is. This advertising is still going on, and it is advertisement that perpetuates the stereotypes, the biases, the gender construction of this. I remember this film Pati Parmeshwar. It keeps on coming even today on television. This went to the courts also. It's the lowest form in which the gender injustice is there. In this film, what happened was, many of you must be aware of it because it's shown very frequently, especially in the afternoons. The husband spends most of the time with the mistress. The devout wife tries her best to make the marriage work. When her husband is not well, she takes him, lifts him and takes him in the wheelchair to the door of to the house of the mistress, waits outside the door till they are inside, and serves him and sees to it that he is taken care of. Now, these are some of the social construction of gender that we have in our society. You will be hearing in other societies as well throughout the day. It's a feast that you'll have. Now, things are changing. There are positive effects that are coming, and there are positive changes as far as gender roles are concerned. There are sensitivity that has come in through education, through various other aspects. Many of you have gone through it. And with many more and more women being independent, aware of their rights, and also power relations are changing, dynamics within families are changing, and that is why you have changes within the family, positive changes that are coming. Sister and brother both have the same education nowadays. Many times they don't say, oh, you go for home science and you go for engineering. You have sharing of power and responsibility between women and men at home, and this has come to light very clearly during the lockdown. There was a debate going on in the social media whether boys should be sons and husbands should be taught cooking. And yes, they should be. And this was a great opportunity for many of them to learn household chores. Cases of DV are coming to light. I'm putting it here because more and more women are coming out in the open. Earlier, they used to suffer and suffer and suffer. But now they come out in the open, and that is why the cases of domestic violence are coming to light. There is collective decision making that is going on. Textbooks are being revised. Revision is going on. Such insensitive textbooks in which there is gender needs to be removed. And that is why NCERT is at the moment doing changes in the textbooks. The gross enrollment ratio in the education, in the schools, is higher, of girls is higher than boys. A good sign. The Right to Education Act, which has made education between 6 to 14 years free and compulsory. We see the effect of that, the impact of that, though more needs to be done on that area. And it is being increasingly acceptable to educate girls now, especially. You talk to any parent, even a parent from a slum area, they want their child to go to school. Only thing they are concerned about, will this education help in getting them jobs? Will it help in enhancing their earning capacity? That is their objective. And that is why we must see to it that our primary education is suited, is more challenging, is to such people who are coming there for learning and for seeing to it that they can be independent later on. Media changes. You've seen a lot of movies that are coming now, which are very gender sensitive. Pink and all such movies that are there. You remember this dialogue in the Pink movie that was there? These boys must realize that na ka matlab na hota hai. उसे बोलने वाली को का परिचित हो, फ्रेंड हो, गर्लफ्रेंड हो, कोई सेक्स वर्कर हो, या आपकी अपनी बीवी ही क्यों ना हो. No means no. And when someone says no, you stop. You know the same famous saying, a gendered statement? When a woman says no, she means yes. That is completely wrong. That is completely out. When a woman says no, it is no. It is an absolute no. It is a clear no. And that has to go down very clearly, even among your students, even among your colleagues, because till today we get cases when people don't understand the meaning of no. And when it is said no, they think it is yes. And no is just being said. Remember those songs in those earlier movies? That it began with na, 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 and it became ha, 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 yes, later. No, it is not like that. Today, a no means no, and the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act clearly says a no is a no, otherwise you'll be in trouble. This advertisement I would like to show a clip, a small clip of changing roles, of changing. Okay, so now you have role changes. You remove the stereotyping. you remove the biases, you have a lot of laws relating to it, and we have women on the company boards that are increasing, and representation of women in corporate India has increased to 30% from 21%, with higher representation in non-technical roles that are there. And technical roles, it is 26%. Now, workplace women, we have examples of women who have broken the glass ceiling. These are the examples. You have women in the Navy, you have women in the Army, and you have women in the board level. So all these are examples of women who broke the glass. The Hindu Succession Act, as I mentioned, has brought about fundamental changes in the Hindu joint family structure by conferring the inherited co-pasni rights to women. And there are several judgments that are given by the high courts and Supreme Courts in favor of women today, and also in favor of the third gender. Remember the judgment in the case of National Legal Services Authority versus Union of India, which was a landmark decision, which declared transgender people to be a third gender and affirmed that fundamental rights that are granted under the Constitution of India will be equally applicable to transgender people, and gave them the right of self-identification of their male, female, or third gender. This judgment is a major step and towards gender equality in India. They also reserved jobs, reservation in jobs, reservation in educational institutions, because they considered them as socially and economically disadvantaged group. Now, this was the gender, this was the landmark judgment. Vishaka's judgment, which gave sexual harassment guidelines, all of you are aware of it. And you have the acid attacks judgment, which was given because there were rising cases of acid attacks that were coming. The two-finger test has been removed, and unwed mothers are not bound to disclose the name of their father. You know the famous judgment of triple talaq, which has been held void and illegal. Adultery is not a crime now, which that 497 was a very biased section. It was the section based on the fact that the woman is a property of the man. Just as you cannot blame the car that is stolen, you catch the thief, you cannot blame the woman who has committed adultery. Now, adultery is no longer crime. Abortion rights of women, can you hear? Yeah, abortion rights of women in prisons. There was a landmark judgment of the Bombay High Court where the abortion rights of women in prisons were being hampered because of various red tapeism that was there. And this was changed, and they were given, the red tapeism was removed. So you have various landmark judgments that is there. I would like to say that, yes, we are, I'll stop sharing now. I'll just like to say that, yes, but in spite of all this, we have still a long way to go. There's a long way to go. We have to have support systems and policies in place. We must see that we are still far from equal ideal representation at workplace. Marital rape, matrimonial property issues are still not being recognized by law. Women dies without a will. Husbands' heirs are given more importance. Revision in textbooks, we still require more. We must also know that women must be aware of their laws and rights. Legal literacy, I think, as a law college and teachers college, legal literacy and rights of women must be a part of your curriculum, and you must take it in your legal services clinics, in your extension programs, so that you have a huge mass awareness public legal education program that is going on for making awareness of the rights. Social legislations are difficult to implement and enforce, and that is why social legislation, because the beneficiaries themselves are weak, and that is why we need to see that social legislation enforcement and implementation. As law college, we can advocate for a reform as far as implementation and enforcement of social legislations are concerned, so that you can have law colleges, social work colleges to be involved in enforcement of these laws, go along with the inspectors, the government inspectors that are doing. And we have to see that law criminalizes sex between minors. If a 15-year-old boy has sex with a 15-year-old girl, then it is penalized today it's regarded as a crime, and the boy is punished in this case. So that aspect is something that we need to look at in the context of gender justice, since we are talking of both male as well as female. Finally, to end, I would like to say that nature has not only treated women equally with men in terms of intelligence, feelings, health, but also blessed her affirmatively with motherhood as well. And that is why I would like to say today we must see to it that we go ahead and spread awareness, empower them, and give choices and options to them so that they can make their own choices and options after being empowered and create awareness of their empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Asha Bajpai, for such a thought-provoking and a wonderful session. It was short and very sweet, but yet included everything that is very important for all of us to think about if we have not started thinking about it. Ma'am, there are a couple of questions which have come up in the chat box. Would it be okay if I read the questions?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Even
Yes.
I looked at the chat box.
Yes, ma'am. The first question that we have is from Dr. Neelu Verma. She is saying that NCERT is revising textbooks, but is there any gender committee or body to keep a check on the content presented by the authors of those textbooks?
To the best of my knowledge, I'll have to check it, because whether there's a gender expert, there should be. What your question is absolutely right. There has to be a gender perspective, and I hope that they have included it, but whether they have actually included or not, I'm not aware at the moment. We'll have to check the committee.
Right.
Yeah.
Ma'am,
But
there's
it's a
another
good question. You need to have a gender perspective and a person with gender knowledge in the revision committee. That is very, very important, and I hope they have included.
Yes, ma'am. The second question is from Dr. Shikha Dwara. She asks that whether increased incidence of domestic violence against women is linked to financial empowerment of women.
I would consider it to be linked to awareness of their rights, and also to the fact that, yes, they know where to go, what to do, and they know that it is wrong. Financial, it doesn't, finance is one of the reasons, but see, we get calls of domestic violence right from the slums till high-rise buildings, from bungalows as well. So I don't think finance is the issue there. The issue is awareness.
Very right, ma'am. Very true. Ma'am, these were the two questions that we had in the chat box, and there are no other questions as such. Yes, just now a couple of more questions have popped up. I'll just take them, ma'am. The first one is, what might be the most important reason that women are always showcased to be in the advertisement, and why not men?
Yes, as I mentioned to you, men advertise for cars. Have you seen a car advertisement with women driving it? Think over the advertisements that are coming recently. The new cars that are being advertised. It's all men who are driving it. So it's again a stereotyping that is there, that is happening. So there are men in advertising, but they advertise for cars, they advertise for petrol, cement, they advertise for strength, they advertise for power. So, but not for kitchen appliances, soaps, and beauty products.
Right. There's another question which you already have answered, but still I would take it up. Kunal is asking, ma'am, do you think people should change their perspectives on male-dominated careers or masculine professions? If yes, how should one go about it? With it?
Can you please explain this a little?
Ma'am, he's asking that whether, people think that, they always think about their profession to be like, male-dominated careers or masculine professions they are taking up. Male should take this and female should take that. So do you think they must change this idea that the professions are male-dominated? If yes, then how do you think people should change their thinking on this?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. There is nothing. See, the gender division of labor came about because of the socialization that started within families and schools and outside. That happened. Now you know that they both are equal. They both are equal in intelligence. They both are equal in health. Then why do you have this sexual division of even in education? If you see, you have so many women scientists. You have so many women engineers. You have women in the the recent Supreme Court judgment, which gave permanent commission to women in army as well. So there should be no job or no profession or career that you cannot take. You need to take any profession, any career. It's hard work, it's your dedication, it's your honesty, and not your sex that will determine your success and your this. That is. And even I would also like to say that we need to also change the attitudes of men. Now, because as I mentioned to you, in lockdown, there are several such examples that are happening. Men, they understand what women go through when they are at home. You must be hearing of many of such things, that how men have now understood that housework and all is not something that is no work. Remember, she does no work. She is a housewife. These are some comments that you hear. But housework is very challenging. There are so many responses. The multitasking that you saw in that video clip that I showed you. How much multitasking she's doing. She's talking in her office. She's doing her household work. She's looking at the child homework. She's looking at the father. So there are so many it's not easy. It's challenging. She can do so many things. And multitasking, if she can do any other job that is there. So there should not be any change. And men should change their attitude. See, the video clip that I intentionally showed you is because if at home the same boy, if he becomes he will have that gender biases when he's there. So when his employees, his subordinates who are women under him, see, we get examples of cases of complaints of sexual harassment at workplace of people, of male bosses especially, who think that they are superior because they have that attitude inbuilt in them. And because of this attitude, the way they treat, for example, in one organization, what had happened was, there was this boss who used to see to it that when a meeting is arranged, he gave the job of serving coffee to his female colleague. And the male colleagues used to sit and write and see to it that they participate actively in the meeting. But the responsibility of serving tea, coffee, and all that was given to the female colleague, because that was his perspective. That was his attitude. That was his socialization, that he was brought up at various sites throughout his life, at his family, school, community, friends. These are all sites of socialization. So all through he has been, this attitude is built in him. And that's why it was difficult for him. He fell into a problem. There was a complaint against him that he discriminates. And as you know, under Sexual Harassment Act, discrimination on the basis of gender is a form of harassment. So he fell into problem. So the attitudes of both male and female, and we should change. And we should see at home, when we are bringing in school, the teachers, because since you have a teachers training college here, the teachers also when they are training teachers, they should realize, the trained teachers should realize that yes, boys and girls are same. You can give them similar kind of responsibilities. I think I still remember, maybe today things are changing, but who goes when there is a chief guest coming, or whenever there is a dignitary coming, who gives flowers and bouquets is generally the women. Even today, because that job, because they are, I'm not going into reasons, but that is the socialization, the gender construct, the social construction of gender. Anything else?
Yes, ma'am. One last question. I can see, even though you have answered that question, that whether somebody wants to know whether there is a concrete way to change the mentality of men towards women in today's scenario. Even though you have been saying this all the throughout this thing, but still, Dr. Ansari wants to know any concrete way to change it.
First of all, we begin changing from home. Right from home, we begin from there. From the time, the gender socialization takes, the social construction of gender starts from the birth. So from the birth, it has to change. From family, it has to change. From school, it has to change, where teachers can do that. Then they come to their friends, the kind of friends that they have, the society, the community, they also needs to change. And then you come to workplace, where there's a lot of gender sensitization courses going on, training aspects going on in many. After the Protection of Women at Workplace Act, you have every organization, every corporate sector, every having gender training. You have gender training in the police, you have gender training in the judiciary, you have gender training at every place that is there. So gender training has become very important. And then you have gender sensitization, that they call it. And then you have awareness of your rights. See, many people don't understand that they're being sexually harassed. I did a study on sexual harassment in university and college campuses. And when I did the study on sexual harassment in university and college campuses, when I spoke to girls, girl students, the answer that I got is, that was the beginning, that was not now, that was the beginning when in 97, when the Vishaka guidelines came, it was just before that I did this study and university and college campuses. The girls, when I went to the campuses, the girls used to be scared of talking to me. They used to take me to a separate place and say, we'll talk to you there. Yes, they had gone through it, but they were not aware that what they had gone through was harassment or not. So what is harassment? What are their rights when they are being harassed? What are the channels of communication that I'm sure all of you must be aware of, but it should be made, everybody needs to be made aware of. And that is why I made a very, I made a very specific reference towards the end of my session, that public legal literacy should be the objective of us as law students, as teachers, because law students are social engineers. Teachers mold the children, their perspective, their attitudes that are there. So law students are as social engineers, then they could take this responsibility of doing public legal education. And many of you are doing it, I know, but it should be done on a mass scale, so that the awareness of their rights is very important. As you all know, ignorance of law is no excuse. I would like to give you one example. Even children in various countries are aware of their rights. Rights empower you. Awareness of rights empower you. As you know, ignorance of law is no excuse. So if ignorance of law is no excuse, you should all be all aware of your rights. And that is why this example that I was giving you, it was about a 16-year-old boy who was arrested. It was a different country, not ours. Who was arrested and brought to the police station. I was an observer there. He came to the police station, and the court and the police told him that you have done this. He said, he banged the table and he said, I want to know my rights. And at the police station, there was a laminated document kept. And in that, his rights were there. And he read that. And he said, I need my lawyer. So he was aware of his rights. So awareness is empowerment. I've recently written a book on From Exploitation to Empowerment. I'll share a little of that book with you. This was of the PIL 182 of the Bombay High Court, in which I was the amicus in this matter. Many of you must have read about that case, in which many children who were orphan children and who were also special children, they were abused in a home. And when medical tests were done, they were physically and sexually abused. They were in a trauma, absolute trauma. Many of them, when the High Court took a suo motu cognizance of it, and many of them were rescued from that place and brought to a different place. And later we collected all of them and did a study of all homes in Maharashtra. And while we were doing all study, we realized there were more people, more children who were abused in that manner. Girl children. In one home, there were only 19 girls, and all of them were abused. We could make out from the way they were behaving and the marks on their bodies. So they were also asked to be examined. They were also found to be sexually abused, but many of them did not know it. Some of them said they were in love with their abusers. So they were not aware of what is happening. Similarly, when I did the study on university and college sexual harassment, Many of the students were not aware of what they were going through. Many of the boys, their responses were, it is pastime for them. And they didn't realize that what they were doing is an offense. And what they were doing was very insensitive. So this is the kind of awareness that we need to create in people, the sensitivity, the empathy, the values. These are soft skills, not being non-judgmental. These are soft skills, but they need to be inculcated. So there needs to be, see, we are doing laws, we are doing sections, we are doing what the law says, but soft skills like empathy, like sensitivity, like being non-judgmental, because being law students, being teachers, you must learn how to be non-judgmental. Because when cases come to you of students, you have to be non-judgmental. So being non-judgmental, counseling, being very therapeutic to people, how to be mentoring people. So these are the skills that need to be developed as law students, as teachers who are going to be there in school. So I would suggest that as something. And also I would like to say that we need to see to it that once both male and female are sensitized and create empathy, be non-judgmental, we'll make better citizens, we'll make better human beings, and maybe we have a different session. Professor Chandiramani will hold a different session on construction, social construction of gender again, and we look at it in a different perspective.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an enlightening session. I'm sure all the doubts would be very, very clear in the mind. And I'm sure all of us have got a way, how to tackle this situation. So I think there are no more questions, ma'am. So we come to the end of this first technical session. On behalf of Nari Gursani Law College and Bombay Teachers Training College, ma'am, Dr. Asha, ma'am, I put this sincere, heartfelt thanks to you for having gone so much in detail on this very sensitive topic and bringing to our knowledge so many things which we already know, but we have never thought about it. So I'm sure people will start thinking about it from a very different perspective. A big, big thank you to you, ma'am. Now we come to the end of this technical session. I see my principal, Dr. Nilima Chandiramani. Do you have anything to say, ma'am?
Yes, Sambita, you know me so well. Professor Asha Bajpai, today you have proved that my decision to have you as the opening batswoman was absolutely 100% right. From the messages that we are getting in the chat, they all are so happy with what you have said. So I'm extremely happy that you accepted my invitation and you have come, and definitely I'm going to trouble you again because we have got the best person in the country to speak. And since we have started on a very good note, I'm sure the whole day will also go very well. Thank you for being with us, and we hope to have you again on something related to this topic or with relation to children. Thank you, Asha. God bless you.
Thank you, Nilima, ma'am. Now we come to the end of this first technical session. For the second technical session, I hand it over to Dr. Lubna Mansoori. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Sambita Dabral, ma'am. I start with the second technical session.
Lubna, ma'am.
Yes.
Lubna, ma'am.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, ma'am. I am not Dr. Sambita, ma'am. The doctor, still, there are few months, I'm few months away from getting that, degree. So it's only Sambita. Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Sambita Dabral, ma'am. I'm sorry for that, but I'm sure you'll achieve your goal. I'm 101%.
Yes, ma'am. Within 6 months. Within 6 months, I'm going to get that.
Sure,
yes.
sure. So I'm I'm making you used to with that tagline and the title. Good afternoon and welcome to the second technical session on the theme Social Construction of Gender. On behalf of Nari Gursani Law College and Bombay Teachers Training College, I, Dr. Lubna Jafar Mansoori, take the immense pleasure to begin with the second session of one-day International Faculty Development Program. I would like to introduce our guest with a quote. The speaker for the second session is Peter Walter Cunningham. I introduce him with a very, very relevant quote, which I feel, according to his profile, matches a lot. The greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. He's the one that gets the people to do the greatest things. Yes, we have a great person with us today, Professor Dr. Peter Cunningham. He is currently affiliated to Nelson Mandela University as a researcher, trainer, mentor, and life coach. He is educated in South Africa and Britain and has been involved in trust areas like human resource management, organizational behavior, sociology, internationalization of higher education, education for peace, and in many training and consultation areas. He has presented a number of scientific papers at leading international and national conferences. In addition to having published extensively in reputable discipline-related publications, he was the only SAP certified consultant in human resource management and business information warehouse at South African Academic Institution. As a widely respected human resource practitioner, he is responsible for developing training material in SAP and conducts research on various topics like organizational behavior and internationalization of higher education. Besides being an evaluator of articles for various publications and an examiner for postgraduate degrees, he is on the editorial board of a number of international journals. He has also received many awards for his teaching and learning contribution. He has close association with India. During his regular visit, he has contributed immensely by presenting training courses, by giving lectures, and has assisted in postgraduate degree supervision and consultation. His most recent contribution is the foreword and the review of the book, Define Your Orbit Success, a Matter of Chance or Choice, written by Manish Panchal and published by The Right Place, Mumbai. We welcome Professor Dr. Peter Cunningham today on this very virtual platform, and we expect and we are keen to listen to the global perspective regarding the theme social construction of gender. Dr. Peter Cunningham, we welcome you today. Sir?
Sir, please unmute yourself.
Is Sir there?
Sir has to unmute.
Professor Peter Cunningham, sir, please unmute yourself.
I have unmuted myself.
Okay, we can hear you now. Thank you, sir. Welcome. Namaste.
Good day. Can you actually see me?
No, we can't see you, sir.
Yes,
no,
yes,
sir, we can see you. Good afternoon, sir.
Sir,
Good afternoon. Can you now hear me and see me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can see your platform and we can hear you, sir.
Great. Thank you very much. I must thank the previous speaker. She addressed a number of very critical issues, and I wish to commend her on the work that she's actually doing. I think the quote that you read of getting people to do great things is very appropriate, in that we've got a group of people in Mumbai, then broader than that internationally, looking at the issue of gender, which I think has become very critical over the past few months if we look at what's happening globally. I just want to start with a few comments. not to go into a discussion of COVID, but I think what COVID has actually done to many of developing countries, but I'll speak specifically about South Africa, is that it has highlighted the fact of the unequal nature of societies and the need for their transformation. When we actually look at this, we can see that one of the consequences of, in South Africa's case, the heavy lockdown has been to raise the issue of extreme gender violence that has actually occurred during this particular period. And I'll return to this particular subject. I think that one of the things that we'll have to deal with, and which we are dealing with, is how to actually ensure that we move out of the situation addressing the gender violence and its actual consequences. Now, when we actually talk about dealing, I want to just sort of take a step back and ask ourselves really ideologically, when we listen to this subject, when we define who we are, when we actually ask ourselves what is our approach to gender reconstruction and construction, and take a look at the theoretical underpinnings of much of our discussion. First of all, I think one needs to ask oneself, do we think as structural functionalists? Meaning, do we see that the current value system, the norms, the roles and the status that actually exist in society as somehow maintaining the current equilibrium and the way that society needs to operate? Now, if we have that particular attitude to gender, we can see that that will actually hold back many of the changes that we're actually promulgating, and I'm sure during the day that we will actually discuss. This has to a large extent been the type of approach to understanding society in many developing countries as well as developed countries, in the way that we actually teach, in the way that we actually analyze society, and the way that we actually see change. Change is often seen as a slow process, and any conflict that is emanating from that process is somehow seen as negative. Therefore, reconstructing gender is seen as somehow disrupting or is negative in some cases to the status quo. Alternatively, we may have a radical perspective where we see that the only way of actually reconfiguring a country like South Africa or India is a radical transformation of what we could see in Marxian terms, the relations of production and the means of production ownership. Now, when we actually look at it from that particular perspective, what we're actually saying is only once the economy has reconfigured itself will we be able to redefine the nature of gender and how gender is actually moving forward. Alternatively, and much of our discussion, as I've seen this morning, is that from a social constructionist, sometimes called a phenomenological or symbolic interactionist, although these are different, perspective to gender, where we see gender as a social construct in many cases, and that social construct, as we saw from the previous speaker, is more emerging out of societal socialization, etc., and that process. So we can see the very way that we actually construct gender in our minds and the way that we actually see it as an issue depends on our theoretical perspective and how we underpin the changes that need to actually occur as a consequence of the particular society that we live in. Now, if we look at South Africa, just to contextualize, we have a population of approximately about 55 million, with slightly more males than females. But in that process, sorry, I just seem to have a problem with my system. What we have is a youthful population which is gradually aging, And we can see that when we look at that, that there's been a decline in the reproductive age of women, with women having fewer children, and a limited increase of educational attainment and women involved in work, as well as we see that there's a delay in marriage and many have opted for smaller families. But in that process, I think what is important when we actually look at the nature of society is to actually ask ourselves, what are the power relations within that society? How is society actually constructed? And when we actually look at that, it relates back again to those perspectives that I had as my opening remarks. If we see that there's an imbalance in power, as we can see in South Africa, where we can identify society as a strong patriarchal society, although we emerged into a democracy in the early 90s. We can see that even with that transformation, there nevertheless has been a continuation of the unequal power relation between men and women in society and between other groups. Now, in that transformation of power, what we're actually looking at is not only reconfiguring our perception of gender, but how are we actually conceptualizing the actual power relations within a society, such as South Africa, or in your case, India? That is a very difficult question. We will address some of the ways in which we're actually attempting to do that. But we have to ask ourselves, what is the end goal? And I think that it was highlighted by the previous speaker, that ultimately we need to actually ensure in this process of restructuring power relations in the society, that we optimize everybody's full potential in their actual being able to contribute to the society, not only in economic terms, but also in emotional terms, etc. As you correctly identified, we are now revisiting what is constituting empathy and its relationship to gender. Often, soft skills have been associated with a particular gender stereotype, where now we're beginning to realize, and have been realizing, particularly in the economic sphere over the past 15 to 20 years, that in order for the actual economic advancement of any country, that men and women and any group that defines themselves in other terms needs to actually have both soft and hard skills in order to self-actualize themselves in the most way that they can receive their full potential. However, what is some of the impediments in that process? We can see that one of the issues in South Africa is the strong urban-rural divide, similarly to India. Although there has been an increase in urbanization, where it now stands at almost 66%, we can see that when we actually step back into the rural areas, many of the traditional cultural traditions and traits around gender stereotypes are still very marked, with women often having to bear the brunt of that process. Many of the women have been left as a consequence of economic activities to fend for themselves in the rural areas, while the male has often moved as a migrant to urban areas to seek work. The consequence of this has been that many of them have not attained the educational level that they should actually. Neither have they been able to enter into full economic activity, specifically into the formal economic sphere. The consequence of this is that we have almost a self-perpetuating situation, with women having to play the role of both matriarch and patriarch within the actual rural areas, which often leads them to having to carry a double burden in terms of looking after the family, as well as having to actually ensure the economic success of their livelihood. This patriarchal society in the urban areas is slightly a carryover in many cases from the traditional cultural norms and values that exist. Now, I think when we have this discussion, what we need to ask ourselves, what are we actually trying to transform in culture? And how do we actually go about that transformation process of cultural norms and values? First of all, I think it's very important for us to realize that each country has a unique set of values and norms, and it needs to actually develop its own set of guidelines, policies, procedures, and legal constraints and facilitation of the process of any change. Although one can actually learn from outside one's country and from outside one's culture, one needs to realize that culture has a very important role in the functioning of any society. And to restructure that requires a more holistic approach to actually the transformation. Which brings us to the political economics of gender. When we actually look at that, we can see that during, particularly now with the decline in economic activity around COVID, but even prior to this, it's almost a part of our society, is that women are most vulnerable when the economic situation becomes more precarious. And as we see a rise in unemployment, as we've seen in South Africa, where many quote figures of up to 40% being unemployed, we can see that the group of people that are likely to be more vulnerable in the situation and be retrenched and be dismissed are going to be women. Now, what are the implications of this is many of the advances that women have been able to make in the economic sphere will have been set back as a consequence of COVID. Now, this vulnerability is not only as a consequence of COVID, but also as a consequence of the way the economy is actually structured, which requires that women actually have to leave home already as single parents in many cases, leaving their children to be minded by either a grandparent or by an elder sibling, which almost creates a spiral of, and I want to use the word, dehumanizing women, or making women feel guilty for having to work, or causing them to have a double burden of conflict as to whether they should actually work or non-work, get married. These are difficult choices that a woman has to make in order to actually survive within the type of environment in which they actually find themselves in the economic sphere. Now, this vulnerability is something that needs to actually, in our construction of gender, needs to be addressed. It goes much deeper than just culture. It goes to the whole psychology of the individual and how they actually are defining themselves or being defined. As we heard from the previous speaker, many people don't want to discuss this vulnerability, don't want to discuss the actual implications of gender abuse and of their position within actual society. This discussion is often, as was rightly said, and in South Africa's case as well, as a consequence of many people not being aware of what their rights are, and as a consequence of a long tradition of abuse, accepting that abuse as almost normal. And when we actually look at abuse, or what we would define as gender violence, we can see that as a consequence of gender power inequalities that are entrenched in our society, that the psychology of gender needs far more emphasis, an understanding of the implications of how women think and are actually taught to think and are expected to change that thought process needs far more attention. Now, when we look at that in terms of strategies, we can talk about the need for possible empowerment of women, which is one way of actually looking at it, but it requires a far more holistic approach than just focusing in many cases on empowering women. And what we're doing in South Africa is now trying to educate men more in terms of what they are doing within the society. Now, looking at gender violence, I think it's probably one of the things that we need to actually examine more detail, and that is that over 40% of South African women will be raped in their lifetime. I can repeat that, 40% of women will be raped in their lifetime. This is totally unacceptable. Only when we actually ask ourselves and step back and say, what are the implications of that type of statistic for the broader society moving forward, and understanding the whole concept of being a democratic society that is meant to actually look at equal rights, will we be able to understand that we cannot move forward as a society unless we address some of the systemic issues that are actually causing that 40% of women to fear being raped in their lifetime. And that is, one must take into account that it is estimated only 1 of 9 rapes are actually are reported. We can therefore see that a far higher number, and I've just used the emphasis on rape. I mean, there's other forms of abuse as we discussed previously. And we can see that when we actually look at the construction of gender, what we're actually talking about is that women are very fearful of actually expressing their rights. So when we actually look at the need to educate people in what their rights are, we also need to provide them with protection in expressing those rights. What we have seen is that many of them are very fearful, even though they are aware of their rights, of reporting the abuse, of even reporting it to a family member, of reporting it even to any authorities or any organization that would actually be able to assist them. So when we actually look at education of women in terms of their rights, what we need to actually also do is simultaneously in that process, provide them with the protection and security of actually being able to express their rights and assert their rights. And I again return back to my point of one must remember that when we're reconstructing the concept of gender, what you're doing is a reconstruction of the whole nature of power within the society. And when we look at that word, reconstructing the power relations within society, we can see that many men and many other groups that are concerned about the restructuring of power relations will defend their position, either consciously or unconsciously, in order to retain their current status within society or their perceived status within society. So, although we may put in all of these mechanisms to restructure women's rights, women's position within society, one needs to have a system which ensures that women are actually protected, that women understand the implications of the support structures that are out in society in order to assist them. A further point of, if you look at gender violence, and we could relate it to gender violence, is the increase in teenage pregnancy. Now, if you look at my curriculum vitae, you'll see that I've worked quite extensively in teenage pregnancy. And one of the things that one realizes in that research, particularly when we were doing face-to-face interviews with children between 15 and 17 who had given birth, and in some cases multiple births by 17, they almost saw it as a norm. They almost saw it as being quite normal to have a child at that particular age. Few understood the implications of having a child to their long-term prospects. Because of the value of children within society, it was seen as more important for them to actually have a child in many cases than having an educational career. And when one actually interviewed these teenagers, one got the impression that many of them did not even understand the fact of how they had become pregnant, or what are the implications of having a child would actually mean. So when we look at the restructuring and we look at the socialization process, what we've also got to look at is how we actually educating people around sexuality and issues of sexuality. Because in many cases, when we look at what is happening in society, many of these issues around constructing gender often emanate because people have not been educated sufficiently on their actual health condition. Now, if we were going to leverage change in this process, a further point that we need to actually ask ourselves is, in looking at the South African conditions, there are very few women who are able to access managerial positions within the economy. And I'm talking specifically senior management positions. So the prospect of advancement, and we speak about the glass ceiling, is a very real situation in a patriarchal situation, where people begin to actually underestimate their career opportunities and career choices where they could actually advance themselves. But now, let's move to, well, how are we actually addressing this in the South African context? How are we levering change around the reconstruction of gender? I think the first point is that one needs to lead by example. And in terms of that, when we look at our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, we can see that the rights of women are clearly ingrained in the documents in terms of the rights to life, dignity, and privacy, but more in terms of rights of equality, where this is clearly an issue that is protected by the Constitution, but specifically by a Bill of Rights. Now, what are the implications of that? Is that everything that is actually emanates from interaction within society is measured against that Constitution and Bill of Rights. This means that ultimately, in terms of the law, that women are protected from unfair discrimination. Nevertheless, one needs to actually distinguish between, again, what the law actually says and people's access to the law. Often in many cases, the access to the law can be an impediment for gender rights, in that many people see the law as in some way not being user-friendly, if I want to use it that way. And what we need to therefore look at as our first point is, although we may have documentation and laws and various policies, both internal to the legal system as well as within the economic system. We need to actually make sure that people are able to feel, and I use the word feel or perceive, that they can actually access these formal documents in order to protect their rights. Now, in many cases, this involves financial issues. And we need to actually ask ourselves within society, have we actually created the channels, the organizations to actually ensure that the most vulnerable people within society have access to them without any financial liabilities? I think this is a very important point when we actually look at the fact that similarly to a country like Brazil, South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world. And with that unequalness becomes fear at exposing oneself to the long-term consequences of actually coming forward and asserting one's rights. One therefore needs to actually encourage people to, particularly women, but not only women, we see gender as much broader than that, of being able to access this without fear of retribution in the long term, particularly in the economic sphere. The next point that I want to say, well, if we actually look at levering change, we can see that we've got a dual discrimination within society. Now, despite the legislation and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, where women feel that they don't have rights within the economic sphere as well as in the social sphere. Now, this is in many cases, this dual discrimination is an issue that is not only prevalent in South Africa, but is much more global. But the dual discrimination needs to be balanced with the fact of the woman actually not feeling that they have sufficient power to actually assert themselves. Which, as the previous speaker outlined, one needs to actually unpack this word empowerment strategies. And when we actually develop empowerment strategies and policies, we can see that empowerment has the effect, and we've seen it over the past 20 years in South Africa, where women have been encouraged to actually join groups, where there's a lot of emphasis on women being exposed to advanced opportunities. However, we need to look at empowerment either as something that is there to restructure or simply there to actually enlighten. And in many cases, the empowerment strategies have been short in terms of only enlightening people as to what are the opportunities. However, there's been little in terms of empowerment strategies that have actually led to concrete policy transformation. So the empowerment, when we start talking about empowerment and the need to actually empower women, we need to actually ask ourselves, are they there simply to sustain the current relations of production or the current power relations? Or are they there to actually radically transform those power relations in order to bring about a new type of society? I think that's an important point when we actually look at the word empowerment. We can see that the word empowerment basically is a continuum from that of purely allowing people to express themselves to that of more radical transformation of society. We need to understand when we're using that word in the case of gender, how are we actually using it? I hope that coming out of this discussion today, that we begin to actually look about that empowerment and the strategies and policies around empowerment should actually be focused more on the radical transformation of the power relations between women and other groups within society, so that they can assume a much more prominent position rather than using the word empowerment almost to sustain the current policies and sustain the current structure of society. The next point that we need to look at is to what extent are we providing greater access to the formal market? And looking at how can we actually ensure, and there the debate moves to what extent can we create an economy, and I'm talking not, when I use the word economy, I'm talking about other institutions as well, such as a university or other institutions. A more inclusive type of approach to the way we constitute an organization. When we use the word inclusive, not only are we speaking about women, but we're talking about other previously disadvantaged groups or currently advantaged groups. Of being able to realize the collective mind of different groups of people or different individuals has a very important role to play in advancing a society in what has become a highly competitive global economic sphere. But not only should we see this as a competitive advantage, but we're also seeing it in terms of humanitarian terms of providing people with the opportunity of becoming more self-fulfilling, more achieving their actual potential. So when we're talking about women gaining greater access to the formal market, we need to ask ourselves, are we actually in our mindset, and particularly when we start looking at people in the legal field or in the academic field, are we actually talking about how can we actually advance a more inclusive philosophy in the way that we actually approach society and the structure of society? Now, if we look at that, what we have seen in South Africa's case is there's been underpinning of that to almost compel companies, specifically through a Black empowerment strategy, to ensure that they have access to capital as well as access to recruitment. And I suppose in the Indian context, we could see that almost as an affirmative action policy. Next, how can we actually further leverage change? One of the ways in South Africa has been to profiling role models of women. And we've seen very important from today's speaking that women have important role in being able to speak their voice and let their voices actually be heard within society. But when we talk about role models, we're not only talking about academic role models, which are very significant, but in many cases also not seen as accessible to all people. What we're talking about is role models in terms of people having achieved in terms of specifically the arts, which are very accessible to the majority of the population. Role models should show, for example, in social media, role models in various other forms of art, in terms of theater, in terms of actual writings, etc., should actually be, again, presented in such a way that they show that the contribution of women, not only to running a family, but to the actual development of science, development of arts, has already established itself with a long history. Too often, if we look, and it would be very interesting for you actually to look now at your academic curricula and ask yourself, do we look at the theoretical orientations that we are expecting students to learn? How many times do we actually refer to historically women's contribution to theoretical development? Very few, very, very few. And it is time that we then looked at the curricula of what we're actually educating our children, both at school as well as in tertiary education, and looked at the role models that we could actually introduce that provide a more inclusive approach to education and the contribution of various groups to the actual advancement of knowledge. So when we're looking at role models, it goes much more beyond just people being seen to be doing things, but also to be seen as having contributed to the intellectual advancement of a particular society. The next point that I want to look at in terms of transformation is that to what extent are we able to develop within society? And we spoke about sensitizing and facilitating various groups but what we're trying to actually do is promoting a society-wide culture of tolerance of difference. Similarly to South Africa, India has a very diverse population. And what has been very important for us in South Africa in terms of managing the transformation has been to develop from a very early age a concept of tolerance of difference. And by tolerance of difference, what I'm again referring to is being able to understand the cultural differences and being able to understand the diversity as well as the convergence of cultural traditions, and ensuring that people through that understanding and knowledge and education have become more aware of each other, but in that awareness become more tolerant. I think that many of our problems that we actually sit with is a lack of understanding, a lack of education of these differences. And the differences are often in some way masked as forms of aggression, of opposition, rather than seen as a tolerance in order to advance the collective, rather than protect the individual. The next point is, if we're going to change, what we need to actually ask ourselves, when we start looking again at the socialization process of children, both at school as well as in the society in general, to what extent are our everyday activities, both in terms of media as well as in terms of normal face interaction, as well as in virtual interaction, that we in somehow are promoting or advancing, either consciously or unconsciously, negative stereotyping. Now, one often, when you're in a society, are not always aware of the whole process of negative stereotyping. But what we are doing in many of our everyday conversations is almost profiling individuals, of almost constructing that profile of what is expected of the individual or how that individual actually is expected to behave in society. And again, it's getting back to the original point that I spoke about in terms of our norms and values. These negative stereotypes are often circulated around in social media, and we've seen quite an advance of those in the current period of lockdown, where people are often very derogatory about certain groups of people. And we need to ask ourselves, what are the implications of our need to restructure gender if we don't actually address those negative stereotypes and attempt to avoid the profiling of people in how we would expect them to behave and how we think others should behave. I think what the next point is that what we now are achieving, and I must commend the organizers of the particular conference today, is actually opening the conversation about the role of disadvantaged groups. What we do see that is many of these conversations almost become restricted in the audience that is actually exposed to them, which is regrettable. Often it is intellectuals or a select group of people that have access to the technology. But I think the situation, and which is part of our process, we almost link it to our empowerment strategy, is to what extent are we able to open the type of conversation that we're having today into specifically the rural areas, of being able to take the conversation in a way that is understood, and not in economic and not in academic terms, but take this conversation to the most disadvantaged people, people that are often illiterate, people that are often unaware of their actual rights, and translate the importance of how a more collective, inclusive type of society could actually be beneficial to the majority of people. To take that type of conversation, of actually creating spaces for that type of conversation among groups that, as I say, the most disempowered within the society. Now, this is very difficult. We've seen that many of the actual conversations are not always translatable to the majority of the population. Many of them do not actually see it as a necessity, as we actually heard from the previous speaker, or do not even understand that it's something that needs to actually be addressed and changed. So the conversation needs to proceed in a way that is group appropriate. So in many cases, we're dealing with almost trying to break the rural-urban divide, of trying to break a number of other cleavages that which exist in society between, not only between the genders, but also between economic groups, between people with different access to educational facilities, etc. It is through opening these conversations that at a level which is appropriate is where we're going to actually find that change actually occurs. And that change often needs to be led by people in the society themselves. I think that if we are going to actually change, and if we look at the process of South Africa's change, it has come from people that have almost been champions in their own community of showing that the community as a whole can advance itself by upgrading the restructuring of gender and the restructuring of the broader relations within the actual society. One of the areas that I have alluded to it before is the use of art, the use of poetry, of drama, have been very successful in transforming South Africa. If we look at our transformation to a democracy, because we were dealing with a very illiterate society, one of the areas that was most successful in getting the message across in terms of rights and obligations, as well as responsibilities and future opportunities, was through using drama, of actually acting out situations that people become aware of what their circumstances are, what they collectively are experiencing, because often, as I mentioned before, many people go through these experiences not realizing that it's much more wider than what they realize. Now, my final comment before I take questions is really what we need to look at is drawing lessons from identity theory and asking ourselves, well, as individuals, and I think now I speak not only as a South African white male, but I speak collectively in a more inclusive way of asking ourselves, if we actually look at ourselves, what is this defining the self? How do we see ourselves defining? I think that only we will be able to restructure our perception of gender when we have more insight into who are we? Who am I? How do I actually see myself? It is that self-knowledge for me which is very important if we want to actually begin the process of restructuring the power relations within society. It is through this process of becoming more self-aware, through this process of realizing that how do I actually project myself? Because often one feels that one is coming across in a way that you would like to actually be seen, only to realize that you could be reinforcing gender stereotypes, etc. It is that defining of self that to me is the critical element of understanding the type of society that we want to move forward. And hopefully we'll be able to move people forward when we ourselves have defined ourselves in a way that we feel appropriate, in a way that we feel we can make the greatest contribution to society. Thank you very much. I will now take questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your informative, your comparative study that you have done and shared your examples about South Africa. You have touched upon the important concepts in sociology, that is the role model, socialization process. You have also given us questions to reflect on constructing, restructuring, redefining gender. Thank you so much, sir. There's one question, sir. I would like to say the question. The Indian Constitution has a provision granting protective discrimination in favor of women. Is there any such provision in the Constitution of South Africa?
When we look at it's not specifically in the Constitution, but there are what we need to look at the accompanying documentation to the Constitution. I referred to what was seen as the Black development, which could be seen as a outflow of the Constitution, where what we're attempting to do in South Africa is not only around women, but about all previously disadvantaged groups to actually advance them. So it is not only related to women, but to give them more access to finance, etc., and to give them more access to actually economic opportunities of these previously disadvantaged groups.
Thank you, sir. There's another question. Is there any gender equality law in South Africa?
Yes, there is. But again, if you look at the actual Constitution, it defines that, and I'll read it for you, that all aspects of South Africa need to be actually stated in terms of equality. So when we look at our Constitution, the right of life, dignity, privacy, but they receive specific mention in what is seen as Section 9 entitled Equality. It says the state may not unfairly discriminate directly or indirectly against anyone on grounds of race, gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic, social origin. So one can see that this part of our Constitution needs to be read in relationship to all legislation.
One more question, sir. What is the approach of judiciary towards the gender discrimination in South Africa?
That probably relates very closely to the previous question.
Yes.
we can see that, as I say, that what we see now coming forward more is emphasis on gender-based violence and the protection of women from that. That would be one area that is now being advanced in currently in terms of protection from, in terms of legal protection. We can also see that various other laws would actually protect people, but if we look at the way South Africa is structured, our highest court is the Constitutional Court, and therefore the Constitution protects gender, therefore all other legislation indirectly protects gender. So as a consequence, there is no room for unfair discrimination based on your gender. And we're not only talking about women, we're talking about gender in its broader sense.
So there's one more question. What socio-cultural factors in South African system which proved as a hindrance in the gender equality?
Let me just take a step back. When we actually look at the structure of South Africa, one needs to understand the whole power structure. And I get back to the power of understanding how power is actually constructed within a society. The dominance of society previously was, to a large extent, a male, white-dominated society. So if we want to actually look at social cultural, we can say that it was a white-dominated, which put it into a white patriarchal society. This is probably still one of the major hindrances of gender equality, in that the culture still has retained in many respects that patriarchal aspect to it. But that patriarchal aspect has been almost coupled with a racial aspect as well. So you get almost a dual hindrance factor of both a cultural, meaning patriarchal, as well as a racial, meaning whiteness, that is to a large extent prevented a more equitable type of society.
So can you elaborate how education, particularly teacher education, addressed the issue of gender inequality in South Africa?
What we've seen is, in terms of education, we've seen two things of significance. One is the recruitment processes within society of educational institutions are now looking almost, and I use the word preferential, of trying to actually ensure a better gender balance within the appointments process. And that's quite a conscious process. So we've seen a shift not only in lower level educational positions, but more in senior appointments, where we've seen our academic structure is slightly different to India in terms of the majority of universities are public universities, and we've seen a gradual increase in the number of senior people occupying positions of authority in those institutions. I think that spells a sort of almost ripple down effect. The other has been a more intervention in terms of establishing gender units, and associated with those gender units is actually the provision of gender sensitization programs within academic institutions. However, when we actually look at the word gender inequality in the South African context, I think one needs to actually ask ourselves, should these programs or initiatives in education be specific to gender, or should they actually be more holistic regarding inequality within society? And I think one of the issues that is going to emerge out of the current COVID situation is that more addressing inequality in its broader sense, where we're going to realize the need for a more equitable type of society in order to address many of the health issues and social as well as economic and political issues that have shown themselves to be evident in the COVID. So I think the emphasis now is likely to shift more to understanding the broader nature of inequality within society and gender being part of that debate.
Thank you very much, sir. It was indeed a informative session. Thank you for sharing your experiences, the examples that you shared. We could relate and connect it to India, as we feel that our culture also is diverse, and where we also are facing the same problems that you have mentioned and discussed in today's platform. On behalf of Bombay Teachers Training College and Nari Guruswamy Law College, I thank you for giving your valuable time, for coming on this platform, for accepting our invitation for this session. Thank you so much. We end this session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. You know, being a true friend, philosopher, guide, and always support of pillar for Bombay Teachers Training College, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I now hand over the session to Sambita ma'am for the third technical session. Over to Sambita ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Lubna. Now we enter the third technical session, where the guest for the day is Fulvia Abundante. I see a ma'am there. She has joined us. On behalf of Nari Guruswamy Law College and Bombay Teachers Training College, I, Sambita Rabral, welcome Fulvia ma'am to this International Faculty Development Program to discuss on a very sensitive issue, which we have already been discussing, that is social construction of gender. We welcome you wholeheartedly, Fulvia ma'am. But before I invite Fulvia ma'am, once again, as a ritual, I would want to aware all the participants give a brief introduction of Fulvia ma'am. Fulvia Abundante is a lecturer in public law at the Department of Law at University of Naples, Federico II. She has been teaching information and communication law since 2014 in the same university. She has published various articles on information and communication law, gender equality, multiculturalism, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion. She is involved in national and international research projects, various such projects. We welcome you, ma'am, to this International Faculty Development Program, and we are very, very eager to hear you and know something about your country on this particular topic of social construction of gender. We welcome you, ma'am, and now over to you, Fulvia, ma'am.
Do you hear me? Thank you very much. I am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you see me?
Yes, we can hear you, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. I am very grateful to Professor Nilima Chandirani and the whole organization to invite me to this important and interesting
There is some connectivity problem. Please address it.
Yes.
Sambita,
no, ma'am. I think it's from her side. No, ma'am. It's from her side, I guess. It's not from our side.
Yes, it's from her side.
Yes, yes. Maybe we'll wait for some time. She may connect back because she's there, but she's not visible. Yes.
Nilima ma'am, network on our side is excellent. There's no problem. Yeah.
Lubna ma'am, can you hear us?
I can hear you,
ma'am. Please unmute yourself.
Ma'am, I'm
Oh, sorry.
unmute only.
I meant, yes. Not Lubna ma'am. I meant Fulvia ma'am. Fulvia ma'am, we can see you. Please unmute yourself because we can't hear you. Hello, Lubna ma'am. Sorry, Fulvia ma'am. Fulvia ma'am. Fulvia ma'am, can you hear us? Please unmute yourself because I can see you on the screen. You are there. Your video is off and your audio is also off. Please unmute yourself.
Ma'am, if you have her number, please mention.
Okay, I'll get.
She's
Samrita,
just lost.
do you
Yes,
have a
ma'am.
number or do you want me to contact her?
Ma'am, if you can contact her, that would be
Right,
better.
I will. I will.
Yeah. She's got disconnected.
किससे तो बोलने यार? Fulvia. Fulvia, I want to talk to her. Fulvia, call me. Call. She's not come. She has come. I remove that. Right? Oh, it's a mandatory. No. Go just go on Zoom. You'll get back. No, she's not connected. She has lost her connection.
Yes. Yes, she's not there. So how do we proceed now, sir?
No, she's trying to connect Samrita. Just 1 minute. I called her.
Wait, ma'am.
We
Yes,
can wait
we
for
will wait.
5 minutes, ma'am.
Yeah, I called her. She's trying to connect. One thing, I'll send her WhatsApp message. No, wait. Fulvia. Please connect. Point. Next, okay. You must see the message. कितने ही कॉल करे सकते. She has not even read the message. She was there right from morning, poor thing. Oh, yeah. And now,
yes.
In fact, she joined at 10:15.
Yes.
Madam will be with us within few seconds.
Hmm?
She's joining. I can see her. She's trying to
Ah.
connect.
Okay, sorry, very
Yes.
sorry. I have instable connection. Sorry, very.
No
very
problem
sorry.
at all, Fulvia. Please continue. Start.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I think it's important to understand the origin of a social construction of gender. So in this way, I start my presentation with a passage of important romance, Memoirs of Adrian by Margaret Yourcenar. Sorry, can I? There is slide on your screen because I don't see.
Yes, ma'am, there is. We can see it. I think this is the email.
Sorry.
Professor Fulvia, we could see
Yes.
your first slide. We could see your
Okay.
first slide. Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Now
Sorry.
we can see.
Okay. Okay. The passage is the condition of a woman is determined by strange customs. They are subjected and protected, weak and powerful, to despised and to respected. In this chaos of contradictory customs, social relations overlap with those of nature. Indeed, it's not easy to distinguish them. In this presentation, I will make an attempt in discussing the influence of culture and the religion on the law and the relationship between the latter with the first two factors. It's important to start.
Ma'am, you can put it on slideshow, ma'am.
Greek mythology and philosophy. Because in order to better understand the construction of gender in the Western countries, above all in Italy, it is important to start from the mythology that creates a negative imaging of women. The Pandora's myth is a clear example. In Hesiod's poem, Opera in Giorni, in which in English, Works and Days, Pandora had a jar containing all manner of miseries and evils. God sent her to Epidemius, who forgot the warning of his brother Prometheus not to open the jar, and he made Pandora his wife. She afterward opened the jar, from which the evils flew out on the earth. Holy hope remained inside because the lid having been closed before it could escape. The key point of the story is the fact that a woman causes the evils in the world. There is another point, in my opinion, that is important, the philosophy, because in the Aristotelical philosophy is important to understand the gender social constructor of a gender. The Aristotle's theoretic approach is based on the existence of natural diversity. Women are not fully human or capable of reasoning, and in general weaker and in nature than men. The four differences justify the inequality. The political order is a consequence of this diversity because only adult and free men can govern the polis. As Eva Cantarella points out, the idea of physical and intellectual inferiority of women was born with Aristotle in the ancient Greek, and he has continued through the Roman age. According to this conceptual approach, there was a strong social division. The public sphere represented the place of rationality, order, and strongness. Therefore, only masculine is a part of it, while the family sphere is the place of biological survival and certainty of the origin of the offspring. This last aspect is fundamental because it is connected with the economical issue. The transfer of ownership was guaranteed only to legitimate children. Moreover, in Greek tradition, married men could have a variety of sexual relationships that are not permitted to the wives. The Latin culture, the Roman age, is founded on pater familias dominance. He had the right to live and die on his wife and sons. The ideal model of a Roman woman is mythological women called tacita muta, a woman who Zeus cuts the tongue. The silence is the most important value for a wife in Roman law. No rights is for women until the death of pater familias. It's necessary to emphasize that also single women like Claudia, the protagonist of Catullus' poems, was considered a peril for Roman society and family structure. Very briefly, the combination of a Greek and Roman culture laid the foundation for the patriarchy structure. During the Middle Age, we have another point, important point in this puzzle. The vision of women derived from the Jewish religion, which became part of a construction of Catholicism. According to Old Bible, women's inferiority is also moral, because the original sin, it was strictly connected with feminine sexuality. Apostle Paul imposes the silence and the submission of women due to Eve's deception by the snake, tempting Adam to eat and fatal fruit, and their transition by eating the fruit herself. Tertullian believed that they are devil's gateway and went to explain that women are responsible for the death of the Christ. And as patristic philosophers, St. Thomas and St. Augustine reaffirmed the suggestion that the women's role is only in the domestic sphere and the reproduction, so that man is totally the control of female body. For a long time, using a modern terminology, discriminatory legislation is threatened by the idea of divine derivation of the law. At the end of the 17th century, the economic transformation created good circumstances to start an improvement for women, in particular in the field of education. Moreover, in Italy, between the North and the South, there were some differences due to these historical factors. In the South, the influence of Spanish crowns, strictly linked with the Catholic Church, made hard every social transformation. The high degree of analphabetism and poverty prevent from any real emancipation. Important is also the Illuminist period, because in this period there is the start of idea of equality in the law. The idea of equality of human being is the most important heritage of French Revolution, but equality is equality among equals, man, rich, and white. Basically, the neutrality of equality is a fiction. It's a rich of ambiguity and contradiction. The social construct of gender was above all in the political sphere. There is no citizenship for women, but it was introduced another essential theme. The diversity is but not on natural inferiority, as in the past, but different role in the society. Maternity is an essential function, and the woman needed to be protected because of its biological condition. This is a paternalist view, first to still present today in some Italian constitution articles. This different conception of a man and woman, no intellectual inferiority, is a first step towards the openness to philosophical and scientific studies. However, it is necessary to underline that the access to education is not finalized to realize self-determination, but is only a way to satisfy man's desire. In the south of Italy, the most important experience of the Illuminist movement, thanks to the role played by women, was the Napolitan Revolution in 1799, that saw Eleonora Pimentel Fonseca as one of the leaders of rebellion against the monarchy. The idea was to promote a new free society from superstition and poverty. The revolution failed and the restoration of Spanish crown prevent from progress the social and economic field. In the rest of Italy, Code Napoleon cancelled the little reform in the civil legislation, introducing on the wave of the French Revolution that permitted women to divorce and to be economically independent. Che succede?
Ma'am, is there any other presentation you're trying to open? Fulvia, ma'am?
Yes, sorry, but yes. I don't see the screen, sorry.
I think the PPT is closed.
I don't see the screen, sorry.
Lubna, ma'am, if you could help.
Okay.
Yes, now it is.
Okay, sorry. The first constitution in Italy is the Statuto Albertino, granted by the king in 1848, that recognized explicit formal equality and subjects, but nothing was diverse for women. In 19th century, was born the first feminist movement within the, is it possible to distinguish between two trends. On the one hand, there are those that thought it is important changing the rule on marriage with equality of husband and wife, equality of parents, and civil legislation on heritage. This movement is more developed in the north. On the other hand, there are those who believe it's necessary to eliminate analphabetism and poverty, more developed in the south, where the economic condition after the reunification is still very hard. Moreover, in the south, there is a significant influence of Catholic Church and feudal economic system, which determines a rigid division of roles inside the family. In the north, the situation is different because there are areas with industrial development where the tasks inside the family are more flexible. A very significant place in reporting the condition of submission and difficulty of emancipation of women was played by Italian female writers, such as Matilde Serao, the first woman to direct a newspaper. In this regard, American gender studies underlined the importance of literature in promoting the awareness of real condition of women. During this period, many legislative proposals were discussed in Parliament to extend administrative electoral rights. Liberal and Catholic agree about this reform, and at the same time in changing some civil rules about the abolition of a special authorization, so that autorizzazione maritale, according to husband, can liberally dispose of wife's assets and income from work. This reform have never been approved because of the advent of fascism. Fascism was a very, very negative period for women because, as Franca Pieroni Bortolotti has written, no political movement was so hostile to any kind of emancipation of women, so consistent in sustaining of a division of a social role, so dedicated to be returning to female condition to solid rock of a pre-bourgeois tradition as was fascism. so that women are excluded from voting and from applying for jobs in public administration. Women were supposed to be paid no more than half the wage of men employed in similar jobs. Certain tax regulations were introduced which were intended to discourage female employment. To synthesize the ideal of fascist women, Mussolini senses is emblematic. My program is Children of Beating. An important passage was the Italian Constitution of 1948, which is the synthesis of three different ideological movements: liberal, Catholic, and socialist Marxist. We have a general principle of equality, Article 10, paragraph 1, which forbids legislative power any discrimination based on sex, liberal ideology. Most important, the paragraph 2 of Article 3 that introduces a substantial equality principle, which requires the state to remove all social and economic obstacles that in practice prevent to full realization of human being. Personalistic principle derived from Catholic and socialist ideals. It's interesting to note that the Constituent Assembly, there were some deputies, in particular Teresa Mattei, who strongly supported the introduction of the expression in practice, because the elimination of the real factor of discrimination, such as different wages in labor sector and prejudice, is a fundamental step to guarantee to every woman the effective self-determination. The Italian Constitution, however, apart from these general principles, has a range of norms in which it is possible to observe the difficulties to combine different ways of thinking. For example, regarding marriage, Article 29 is characterized by a deep ambiguity, because while it provides the equality between wife and husband, with equality of sex, in case of conflicts about decision in the family, the will of husband prevails, gender construction. Moreover, in the first period of application of the Constitution, there are criminal and civil legislation evidently in contrast with the Constitution. The Constitutional Court, until the end of 16, has used a cultural interpretation of legislation against the literal meaning of a constitution. For example, the female adultery is considered a crime different from male adultery until 1968. In 1961, the Constitutional Court considered constitutional this norm and not contrary to equality principle, because the adultery of women is immoral and creates disorder in the family. The 70s, the feminist movement imposed important transformation in society and in legislation. Also, the Church, in constancy of Concilio Vaticano II, recognized that women have a significant role in the society and shown some openness about contraception and self-determination of the woman. The most important reforms are in direction of abrogation of all norms against the Constitution, in family law, labor law, criminal law, and towards an introduction of an important legislation that allows the abortion. In the south of Italy, the impact of female revolution is not strong as in the north. Cultural heritage is very hard to die. The marriage and maternity even now is considered a fundamental step in woman's life. This is because it's very difficult to find a job and the familiar structure is patriarchal yet. A key role in changing legislation could be attributed to intervention also of the Court of Justice and EU intervention, because in Italian system has a good influence about of supranational legislation and policy in emancipation of women. Despite significant progress in the legislation and the cultural approach, the Italian society in general and in particular in south of Italy is built on predominance of male. For example, women accumulate work and family burdens without any assistance of men. A strong division of feminine and masculine roles following stereotypes and prejudice are common. Women are more qualified to attend this scientific study, but they have very difficult to access work and keep a job during the pregnancy and the infancy of children. The key point, in my opinion, is the welfare state model. The welfare state is modeled on male breadwinner, different from other European countries. Yet, in these years, no political parties had developed a strong policy supporting women about double caring, children and older people. All we know that Italian society is the oldest society in the world. So it's difficult for women to combine this position. A recent research has asserted that the women with the 2 children lose the job because it's difficult to combine job and family. In recent economic crisis and now with the pandemic, much more women lose the job. Violence against women are increased horrible in last year. Murders and rapes are on the agenda. There are a lot of legislation, of laws on the violence, domestic violence, and the criminal code in last years are a lot of norms in this sector. But the problem is it's difficult for women
Hello. Fulvia ma'am, we cannot hear you. Hello. There's a connectivity problem again.
It's from her side.
Yes, yes, it's from her side. Yes. We'll try to contact her and get back soon. She's lost the connectivity, so we'll have to wait for a few minutes.
She will be with us within few seconds.
Yes, hopefully. We are trying. Yeah, she's there with us.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You may continue, please.
In representative assembly, the presence of women is not very high because the Constitutional Court in 1995 excluded the legitimacy of affirmative action in political field. After modification of 51, yeah, do you understand?
Yeah, ma'am. Fulvia, ma'am, we cannot see your screen. Yeah, we cannot see your screen.
Sorry?
We cannot, yeah, your screen is not visible, ma'am. Your PowerPoint presentation is not visible.
Sambita, never mind. Let her speak. Let her speak.
Oh, okay.
Never mind.
You may continue, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. In representative assembly, the presence of women is not very high because the Constitutional Court in 1995 excluded the legitimacy of affirmative action in political field. After modification of Article 51, that recognized the equality of opportunities to access elective offices and many changes in electoral system, today is allowed only sex preferences at regional elections. It is possible to give two preferences, but the second preference, it must be of the different sex of the first. From December 2019, we had the first woman president of the Constitutional Court. At the moment, only an affirmative action legislation exists in Italy. The public companies have to guarantee the 50% of women in the boards of directors. Italy is not place for women because cross-fertilization of ancient Greek philosophy, Roman law, Catholic influence create a very strong patriarchal background that is complicated to modify. The improvement in women's condition in many cases depends on their capacity to become economically independent. The family is a place where differences of role are strongly present and where submission of women are existing yet today. Legislation is very important but not sufficient. It's necessary, in my opinion, to act to reasons of discrimination, changing the way of thinking how to be women, from the women first, through the awareness of the reasons why there is a social construction of gender. In Italy, there are many movements that are starting to create the condition to change the educational system, to act on the power system, but it's not sufficient because the mentality is very strong. About in the South, where the social construction of gender is very, very hard to distract. I am very sorry. I conclude, but thanks for your attention. I am very, very sorry because this connection problem.
It's okay, ma'am. It's absolutely okay, ma'am. These things always happen when there is a large number of audience. It always happens. So it's okay, ma'am. No issues. So thank you so much, Fulvia, ma'am. That was a very interesting session. In spite of so many technical glitches, I saw everybody was glued to their seat, and I think nobody left the seat. So it was very interesting, where you kind of,
Sorry?
From the Roman age till today, and the constitution, everything. It was like, it was like a the journey from the Roman age to here.
Yeah.
I actually myself wanted to listen to you so much, but because of the technical glitches, which I said always happens, it was a wonderful session and very, very informative, ma'am. Thank you so much that you accepted our invite and came over here. Ma'am, I would now open the platform for questions from the audience if they have any questions to be asked. Right? So there are a couple of questions in the chat box which I would want to draw your attention to. The first question is coming from my own principal, ma'am, Dr. Nilima Chandiramani, where she is asking that whether Italian laws permit altruistic or commercial surrogacy. Whether Italian laws permit commercial surrogacy. She wants to know that.
Sorry, can I read the question, please? Because
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. There is a question.
Ma'am, it's a question from Nilima Chandiramani at 129. She has posted it.
Sorry, I don't find it.
So I'll read it again for you, ma'am.
Okay,
Whether Italian, yeah. Did you get it?
I don't find, sorry.
So I'll repeat it for you, ma'am. I'll repeat it for you. Whether Italian law permits commercial surrogacy. Whether surrogacy is allowed in Italy. Can you hear me, ma'am?
No, sorry, I don't hear well.
Ma'am, if you check the chat box, the questions are there. From down, just fourth or fifth question may be there. Yeah, fourth or fifth question. Ma'am, can you hear my voice? Can you hear me, ma'am?
No,
Fulvia,
not
ma'am,
well.
can you hear me?
No, not well. Sorry, not well.
Because if you can hear me, then participants can unmute themselves one by one, and they can ask the questions in that case.
Chandiramani, madam, you need to unmute.
Oh, Professor Fulvia, can you hear me?
Not well, not well. It's stable. No, sorry, it's unstable connection. So sometimes I listen to you, sometimes not. So I have no idea what is the question. So can you write to me on the chat so it's possible to read and answer to you? Do you listen to me?
Yes, I can listen to you, and don't worry about the questions. I want to thank you for having accepted our invitation, because I know the condition of COVID in Italy is bad. But fortunately, you are in southern Italy where the situation is not so very bad. Second, please don't be sorry at all. It is something totally beyond your control, and I'm sure all the participants understand that. And listening to you was very interesting, because it made us realize that this stereotyping of women is not unique to India. It pervades many cultures, whether it is South Africa or it is Italy. Another interesting thing I noted was, just like Italy, even in India, this was rooted in mythology, religion, till we got the constitution. But today I'm very happy that India seems to be in a better position than Italy in various aspects. Like, as you said, family matters and others, we are not that bad. So we can draw a comparison. And I'm reminded of a book on that the book is of Ancient Law by Henry Summer Mill. I don't know, Fulvia, whether you have read it, where the author, Henry Summer Mill, has compared the Roman society with the Indian society. And he has said the Roman society was progressive and the Indian was not, because it clung to its customs. But now I think it's vice versa. So there are many things in common, including your national flag and our national flag. So we have had a very interesting session and we are extremely grateful to you, and you don't have to regret anything. And kindly convey my personal thanks to Professor Domenico Amirante for having introduced you to us. Thank you so much, Fulvia.
Thank you to you for all. Thank you.
We will invite you again.
Thank you so much, Nilima ma'am, for the wonderful winding up of the session. I think we have come to the end of this technical session. I think we can take a small break, and I request Lubna ma'am or Meenakshi ma'am to kindly tell us the further thing, what we are supposed to do. Are we leaving for a lunch break or what?
Now we are having a lunch. We are breaking for lunch and we will be assembling again at 4 o'clock. Okay?
Yes.
So 5 minutes to 4, 10 minutes to 4, let us all assemble. Now there is a lunch break. So thank you very much, everyone. Hope to see you at 4 p.m. sharp. Thank you, Sambita. Thank you, BTTC, and the staff, the faculty, and the entire student team. Thank you. Thank you, Principal Balani.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll all meet up.
Meet at 4 o'clock this evening.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Minutes to 4. The participants are requested to be back at 4 o'clock.
On the same link, ma'am?
Right, on the same link. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.